From factory children losing fingers to entire families dying of lung disease to workers locked inside burning buildings, this is the brutal reality of how the first factories operated. And some of these facts are so shocking you'll wonder how anyone survived. Like the fact that in 1830s England, the average factory child lived to just 19 years old. While their bosses lived into their 60s and 70s, kids were dying before they could even vote, because they spent 14 hours a day breathing cotton dust, coal particles, and metal shavings, starting at age 6. And factory owners knew this was happening. They had the statistics. They just didn't care because replacing a dead worker cost less than installing safety equipment. From Richard Arkwright's first water-powered mill in 1771 to the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911, the first 140 years of factory work were a bloodbath. And it's time someone actually explained how bad it really was. Before factories, people worked from home, making stuff by hand at whatever pace they wanted. Textile workers spun thread and wove cloth in their cottages, taking breaks whenever, working maybe 10 to 12 hours spread across the day. Families controlled their schedules. Kids helped out, sure, but they also played and went to school sometimes. It wasn't perfect, but it was flexible. You owned your time. But in 1771, Richard Arkwright opened his water-powered cotton mill in Cromford, England, and everything changed. This wasn't about making better cloth. It was about control. 'Cause Arkwright figured out that if he put all the workers under one roof, with all the machines in one place, he could watch every single person every single minute. No more working from home, no more breaks when you felt like it. You showed up when he said, left when he said, worked at the speed he demanded. Talk about a raw deal. First factory workers earned about 6 shillings a week. Sounds like money, right? Wrong. Rent for one room cost 3 shillings. A loaf of bread cost 4 pence. By week's end, you were broke. And Arkwright knew this. He designed wages to keep workers perpetually poor, so they'd never save enough to quit. But here's where it gets darker. Adults didn't want these jobs. They had skills, pride, memories of working for themselves. So Arkwright targeted children instead. Kids between 6 and 10. Small enough to crawl under running machines to grab loose cotton. Cheap, costing half what adults earned. Easy to control because they were children. Imagine being 7 years old, working 14 hours surrounded by massive spinning frames with exposed gears and belts, moving at terrifying speeds. One wrong move and you lose a finger, or a hand, or your hair gets caught and your scalp rips off. This happened constantly. Factory records from the 1780s show child workers suffered injuries at double the rate of adults, 'cause they were smaller, clumsier, falling asleep after 12 hours standing. And Arkwright wasn't alone. Within 10 years, over 20 mills across England used the same model. Locked doors, 14-hour shifts minimum, child labor as the foundation. By 1800, over 50% of textile factory workers in Britain were under 14. Half. Children. But if you think textile mills were bad, just wait till you see what happened underground. Unlike textile mills, where you could at least see the machines trying to kill you, coal mines operated in complete darkness, 'cause coal mining wasn't just hard work. It was factory work, hundreds of feet underground with zero light, zero ventilation, and explosions that could incinerate everyone in seconds. The worst job? Trapper. Trappers were children between 5 and 8 years old who sat alone in pitch-black tunnels for 12 to 14 hours. Their job was opening and closing wooden ventilation doors when coal carts rolled past. That's it. Sit in absolute darkness. Listen for wheels. Pull a rope. Close the door. Wait in silence for 12 hours. As a 6-year-old, imagine that. You're on a cold stone floor in blackness so complete you can't see your hands. No candle, 'cause flames caused explosions. No company, 'cause trappers worked alone. Just you, rats crawling over your legs, and distant rumbling echoing through tunnels. One inspector in 1842 interviewed a 7-year-old trapper named Sarah Gooder, who said the darkness scared her so bad she couldn't sleep at night anymore, even at home. Absolutely insane. But trappers weren't even the worst job. That went to hurriers. Kids ages 8 to 12 who dragged coal carts through tunnels on hands and knees. Not little carts. Wooden sleds loaded with 300 pounds of coal that kids pulled using chains attached to leather belts around their waists. The tunnels were 2 feet high, so hurriers spent entire shifts crawling through cramped, airless passages, straining against weight 3 times their body weight. One 11-year-old hurrier named Ellison Jack testified she worked 4 a.m. to 5 p.m. pulling coal, and it hurts my back and arms terrible bad, and the belt cuts into me. And if physical torture wasn't enough, there was fire damp. Methane gas that explodes on contact with flame. Miners used canaries to detect it because birds died before humans showed symptoms, giving maybe 60 seconds to evacuate before the whole mine became a fireball. At least the canary got warning. In 1812, the Felling Colliery disaster killed 92 miners, including dozens of children, when fire damp ignited. The explosion was so powerful it blew equipment off the surface. Witnesses said flames shot 300 feet into the air. How did anyone survive this? And if coal mines controlled where you worked, factories controlled when you worked, down to the second. 'Cause factory owners didn't just control your body, they controlled time itself. And here's the genius evil part. Factory clocks ran fast, deliberately fast. Owners set clocks 10 to 15 minutes ahead of real time, and since workers didn't own watches and there were no public clocks, nobody could verify. So when the factory bell rang at 5 a.m., it was actually 4:45. When you left at 7 p.m., really 6:45. That's 20 to 30 minutes of stolen labor every day. 50 free hours per worker every month. Imagine if your boss could just change all the clocks and steal an hour daily. That's what they did. And if you showed up late by 1 minute according to their rigged clock, fined. Lateness fines ranged from 6 pence to a full shilling, often equal to an entire day's wages. Miss the bell 3 times in a month and you worked for free. The system was designed to be unwinnable. But time control went beyond clocks. Factories ran on bells. Different bells for everything. One to start, another for the 10-minute breakfast break, a third for 20-minute lunch, a fourth to resume, a fifth to end the day. Your entire existence dictated by bells like you were a trained animal responding to audio cues. And those breaks? A generous 30 minutes total for a 14-hour shift. But you couldn't leave the floor. You ate right next to the machines, which meant bread covered in cotton dust, water tasting like coal, lunch seasoned with metal shavings. Delicious. And bathroom breaks? You asked an overseer for permission. They timed you. Take too long, get docked pay for wasting company time. Factory records from the 1820s show workers fined for excessive urination. One Manchester mill fired a 14-year-old girl in 1831 for spending 4 minutes in the privy instead of 2. You literally couldn't even pee without permission. But time control was just the beginning. Factory owners also had eyes everywhere, because factories hired overseers whose only job was beating workers into submission. This was someone's actual job title. In England, overlookers. In America, billy rollers. All carried the same tool, a 3-foot leather strap designed specifically for hitting people, mostly children, 'cause kids were the primary targets, easier to intimidate, couldn't fight back, made up over half the workforce. Overseers patrolled the floor, looking for anyone slowing down, making mistakes, or falling asleep. When they found someone, they administered strap oil. Yeah, that was the actual slang for getting beaten. The job was maintaining speed through violence. Production dropped. Overseers got docked pay, so they had financial incentive to hit children harder and more frequently. Factory records from the 1830s show Manchester overseers averaged 15 to 20 beatings per shift. That's hitting a child every 30 to 40 minutes for 12 hours straight. One particularly horrific example, a Leeds textile mill in 1832 employed a striker named John Burley, whose job was walking around with a 2-foot iron rod, beating any child who looked drowsy. A parliamentary investigation interviewed kids who worked under Burley. One 10-year-old girl, Mary Richards, testified Burley struck her knuckles so hard he broke 2 fingers. Her hand never healed. She couldn't close it for the rest of her life. Burley faced 0 consequences, 'cause there were no child labor laws. Beating children wasn't illegal. It was standard procedure. Another common punishment was the wait. Fall asleep at your station? Overseers tied heavy iron weights around your neck and made you walk the factory floor for an hour while still working. Imagine being 8, sleep-deprived, forced to carry 20 pounds of iron while operating dangerous machinery. Talk about motivation. But the violence wasn't just about speed. It was about control, about breaking resistance. Factory owners knew if workers organized, the system collapsed. So they used overseers to create constant fear. Keep your head down, move fast, never complain. One Birmingham Iron Works overseer was quoted in 1840, "The strap teaches them respect faster than words could." Yeah, nothing says respect like traumatic brain injuries. And if you avoided the beatings, the machinery got you anyway, 'cause in the first factories, losing a finger wasn't if, but when. Injury rates were staggering. A government survey of Manchester textile mills in 1833 found over 60% of workers suffered at least one major injury during employment. 60%. More than half walking around with permanent damage. The injuries? Ranked by frequency: finger amputations, crushed hands, scalping. Yeah, scalping. Most machines had exposed belts and gears, spinning at high speed with 0 guards. Long hair? Lean in too close and machinery catches it, rips your scalp clean off in 2 seconds. Survival rate under 10%. Most bled out or died from infection. These were children. Most common injury came from little piecers. Kids ages 7 to 12 who fixed broken threads on running machines. You'd crawl under or reach into moving machinery, grab broken thread, tie it, pull your hand out before gears caught you. Except sometimes you weren't fast enough. Birmingham medical records from 1838 show little piecers accounted for over 40% of hand injuries. One example. In 1829, 8-year-old Thomas Clark, working at a Lancashire cotton mill, got his right hand caught in a carding machine. Gears pulled his arm into the elbow before an overseer stopped the machine. They amputated on the factory floor with a saw. No anesthetic. He went back to work 3 weeks later doing one-handed tasks for half pay. That's absolutely insane. Deaths were even more common. A parliamentary investigation in 1840 estimated factory workers died 15 to 20 years younger than agricultural workers. Not from old age. Factory workers in their 30s had lung capacity and joints like people in their 60s. Breathing cotton dust, coal particles, metal shavings. 14 hours daily destroyed your respiratory system. Most textile workers developed brown lung by their 20s, slowly suffocating over the next decade. And here's the darkest part. Factory owners had done the math. Stopping a machine to pull out a dead worker cost more in lost production than hiring a replacement. One mill owner in 1835, "Machines are expensive, workers are cheap." So, when someone got caught in gears, overseers sometimes waited until shift's end to extract the body rather than stop production. Talk about cost-benefit analysis. So how did factory owners justify this nightmare? Simple. They lied. Because while workers lost limbs, factory owners wrote pamphlets about how great factory life was. In 1835, Manchester mill owner Andrew Ure published The Philosophy of Manufactures, claiming factories provided moral education and saved poor children from lives of idleness and crime. Yeah, super moral. Nothing says moral improvement like finger amputations. Ure's propaganda claimed factory work offered fresh air and exercise. The reality? Workers spent 14 hours breathing cotton dust so thick you couldn't see across the room. By 30, most had lung disease. But sure, Andrew, fresh air. The playbook worked like this. They said factories rescued children from poverty. Actually, factories destroyed home industries, creating the poverty, then exploited the desperation. They said factories taught discipline. Actually, they taught children their bodies were disposable and lives had no value. They said company housing was generous. Actually, it was a debt trap. Let's talk about that housing. Factory owners built dormitories next to mills and rented rooms to workers at rates auto-deducted from wages. Sounds convenient? Wrong. These weren't apartments. 10 to 15 people crammed into a single room. No running water, no sanitation, no ventilation. A Bradford government inspection in 1842 found rooms 12 feet by 10 housing 14 workers who slept in shifts. One group left for their shift, another climbed into the same beds. Still warm. Rent? 3 to 4 shillings per week, roughly half your wages, but you couldn't opt out. Factory contracts required company housing as employment condition. You worked 14 hours, paid half back for a sleeping space shared with 13 others, had maybe 2 shillings left for food. Then company stores, factory owners set up shops selling necessities at 20 to 40% above market rates. Workers were required to shop there. Some factories paid in tokens only spendable at company stores, making it impossible to buy cheaper elsewhere. One 1838 textile worker testified after rent and required purchases she had 1 shilling 3 pence per week to feed herself and 2 siblings. Factory owners defended this straight-faced. Robert Owen, ironically a progressive owner, wrote in 1813 company stores protected workers from price gouging by outside merchants. The mental gymnastics are Olympic level. When injuries happened, factory owners employed medical officers paid to blame worker carelessness. An 1831 Liverpool medical report investigated 12 serious injuries in 1 month. All 12 attributed to worker negligence or failure to follow safety procedures. But there were no safety procedures, no training, no guards, no emergency stops, straight out of a dystopian novel. But workers weren't buying it, and eventually they fought back. 'Cause by the 1810s, workers had enough and started smashing the machines, killing them. The Luddite movement began in 1811 in northern England's textile regions. And contrary to myth, these weren't anti-technology extremists. They were skilled workers watching factories destroy their livelihoods and bodies, fighting back the only way they could. The movement took its name from Ned Ludd, possibly fictional, who supposedly destroyed 2 stocking frames in rage. Real or not, Ludd became a symbol. Workers signed threatening letters to factory owners as General Ludd or King Ludd, promising to destroy machines if conditions didn't improve. And they followed through. Between 1811 and 1816, Luddites conducted hundreds of nighttime factory raids. They targeted power looms and mechanical frames specifically, machines that replaced skilled craftsmen and made owners rich while workers starved. One April 1812 raid on William Cartwright's Yorkshire mill involved over 150 workers armed with hammers and axes. They caused over $6,000 damage, roughly $500,000 today. Can't blame them, but the government response was brutal. In 1812, Parliament made machine breaking punishable by death. Breaking a machine killing workers could get you hanged. Actually killing workers by running dangerous factories? Totally fine. The legal double standard was stunning. Between 1812 and 1813, 17 Luddites were hanged. Dozens more transported to Australia. The British government deployed more troops suppressing Luddite uprisings than fighting Napoleon in Spain simultaneously. Let that sink in. More soldiers protecting factory equipment than fighting an actual war. But machine breaking wasn't the only resistance. Workers organized strikes, equally dangerous. The Combination Acts of 1799 made unions illegal. Meeting with other workers to discuss wages was criminal. Workers did it anyway. One of the first major strikes, 1818 at Manchester Cotton Mills. Over 20,000 workers walked out demanding 12-hour days instead of 14. Factory owners called in the military. A cavalry unit charged into strikers, killing 4, injuring dozens. The strike collapsed within a week. These workers risked everything. Another striker, textile worker John Doherty, spent years organizing across multiple factories in the 1820s. Arrested 5 times, imprisoned twice, blacklisted from factory work. But he kept organizing. In 1830, he helped found one of the first successful textile unions, growing to over 20,000 members before being crushed by owners and government in 1832. Turns out they were right. Conditions were inhumane. Workers deserved protection. The system was designed to exploit and dispose of human beings. Decades of resistance eventually forced change. But those first factory workers? They never saw it, because the first real factory reforms didn't come until 1833, over 60 years after Arkwright's first mill. The Factory Act of 1833 was Britain's first attempt at regulation. Here's what it accomplished. No children under 9 in textile factories. Children under 13 could only work 8 hours daily. That's it. The groundbreaking reform. Which means 13-year-olds could still legally work 12-hour shifts. The law only applied to textile mills, not coal mines, ironworks, any other industry. Plus, Parliament created factory inspectors, but hired exactly 4 for the entire country. 4 guys monitoring thousands of factories across England, Scotland, Wales. The system was designed to fail. Real change came from reformers like Lord Ashley, later Earl of Shaftesbury, who spent decades fighting for protections. In the 1840s, Parliament conducted investigations actually interviewing child workers. One 9-year-old testified she worked 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. with one 30-minute break, beaten if she slowed down. Her testimony, along with hundreds of others, finally moved public opinion. The 10 Hours Act passed in 1847, limiting workdays to 10 hours for women and children. Took another 30 years before adult men got the same. Nearly a century of bloodshed before workers got a 10-hour day. The cost? Historians estimate between 1780 and 1850, over 10,000 children died in factory accidents in Britain alone. Tens of thousands more permanently disabled. Those numbers only count documented deaths. The real toll was probably much higher. Every labor protection we have today exists because workers fought, bled, and died for them. The weekend? Strikes. Overtime pay? Union negotiations, OSHA and safety regulations, built on bodies of factory workers crushed, scalped, poisoned. In 1819, a 10-year-old girl named Anne Egley worked as a hurrier in a coal mine. She dragged coal carts through 2-foot tunnels 12 hours daily. She died at 11 when a tunnel collapsed. Her name appears in parliamentary records only because a reform investigator interviewed her 2 weeks before her death. She's one of maybe hundreds of thousands of child workers whose names we'll never know. We owe them. Next time you complain about your job, remember you get bathroom breaks, lunch, weekends, safety equipment, because someone's great-great-great-grandparent died fighting for those rights in a factory that treated them like disposable parts. And there you have it, the brutal truth about how the first factories worked. And if you thought this was dark, wait till you see what happened during the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where factory owners literally locked workers inside. Click this video right here and see how history repeated itself.